Hi yarny friends, I'm Sara Sach. Welcome to my crochet channel. Today's video we're going to be stitching up our Scrap Happy project of the month. And this month our project is this beautiful Scrap Happy Veterans blanket. Now I did all different shades of red, white, and blue. And you can see we did variegateds and solids. And I just rolled them up on some of those crazy balls that I talked to you about. And I'll show you that in just a minute. And some of them, like this one, was just white and blue already together. And I've got one that's red and white already together. And then variegateds, different shades of blue, different shades of white, and different shades of red. Now, because I did this all in red, white, and blue, I'm just calling it a veterans blanket. But you don't have to use the colors that I chose. This is just something I wanted to do and put out before Veterans Day. And it's a really quick stitch up because it's basically a 2-row repeat once we get started. So this blanket measures approximately 32 inches wide and 42 inches long. But of course, you can make your blanket any size that you need. And as always, I'll put all the sizing and multiple information on that blog where I have the written pattern. And of course, I'll put that pattern link down in the notes underneath this video. So again, we're using all medium weight number 4 acrylic yarns. And it's all different shades of blue, red, white, and blue variegated. And then I have this all rolled up. And this is one of those I call crazy balls. I get all things that I want to do for one project. And I've got some solids. I've got some variegateds in here, white, things like that I want to do for one project. And then I roll it all up into a ball so that I can just go from color to color without having to do a lot of changing. Now, you will have a lot of changing colors in this project. And I really recommend that you use like the Russian join or something similar in joining your yarns together, because this is a blanket that we want to be used. And we want them to be able to put it through the wash if they need to. And that's why I chose to go with all acrylic yarns. My thing about washing blankets is wash them on gentle. Add just a tiny bit of white distilled vinegar in your rinse cycle, regular laundry soap, whatever you want to use. Dry it on gentle, and usually it won't be completely dry. And then I lay it out in the sun or maybe across the dryer to let it finish drying. You can wash acrylic regularly in the washer and dryer. I just want it to last as long as possible when I make something like this. And so I just try to be careful in how I wash it. You can also, if you have a clothesline, hang it on your clothesline to dry, which I had one in my old house, but we're not allowed to have them in the house that we're in now. I kind of miss that. All right, so the amount of yarn you're going to need, and this is depending on how tightly that you stitch, is about 12 to 14 ounces of yarn. Now this is all stitched with just one strand of yarn, okay? But it's up to you, again, your colors. You could do it all in one color. You could do it all in different colors. The idea of this is to make a scrap blanket that can be used. I love to do scrap projects because I think it takes yarns we may not have a big enough project to work with, and we put them in something like this, and we've made something very useful. A warm and beautiful blanket. And this one's going to be given as a gift as well. All right, so all medium weight, number 4 acrylic yarn, between 12 and 14 ounces. And again, if you're making it bigger, you're going to need more yarn. Okay, we're going to be stitching today with our eye hook, 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. And then you need a needle because, again, we're going to be doing a lot of weaving in and out because we're changing colors a lot, and a pair of scissors. Now, if you want to make your blanket the 32 by 42 inches, you're going to need to chain 103 chains. If you want to make it bigger or smaller, you can find the multiples and that information again on that blog that I have given you the link for that's down underneath this video. It's super easy to adjust, and you can make it however width you need and whatever length that you need. All right, so I'm going to do my swatch 33 chains. And if you want to make it the size that I made, you need to chain 103 chains. We're going to begin by placing a double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4. We will be counting this beginning chain 3 as our first stitch, and we're just going to stitch 1 double crochet in each of those chains all the way across our row. This will give us a foundation to work off of for our blanket. One double crochet in each of your chains all the way across. I have completed my chains across. Again, I'm doing a swatch, so I only have 31 double crochets. You're going to have 101. We began with 103. We stitched in the 4th chain from the hook, and this chain 3 counts as our first stitch, and you're going to have 101 double crochets. I have a swatch, so I have 31 because I started with 33. So we're going to chain 3 and turn our work. Our chain 3 will count as our first double crochet on every row. Now we're going to double crochet in the next 2 stitches. In the next 2 stitches, we're going to begin by stitching a front post double crochet in the next 2. That means we're going to go around the post of the stitch instead of stitching in the top. So we'll go around that post and stitch a double crochet twice. So there's 1. Now we'll go to the next post and stitch 2. All right, so we have 3 double crochets and 2 front posts. We're going to skip the next 2 stitches, and then in that next stitch we're going to stitch our shell stitch. And for today's project, our shell stitch is 2 double crochets, a chain 1, and 2 double crochets. 1 and 2. We're going to skip the next 2 and stitch a front post double crochet in the next 2. And so what we're going to do is we're going to continue to repeat this across. So we'll skip the next 2, shell stitch in the next, which is 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets in the same stitch. We'll skip 2 and stitch a front post double crochet in the next 2. That's how we're creating that really nice texture. All right, so let's repeat again. Skip the next 2, shell stitch in the next, and again, just to repeat, our shell stitch is 2 double crochets, chain 1, and 2 double crochets. We'll skip the next 2 and front post in the next 2 stitches. So what you're going to do is you're going to continue to repeat this across. Front post in the next 2, skip 2, shell stitch, skip 2, front post in the next 2, all the way across until you have 5 stitches left. All right, we'll skip the next 2 and then 1 double crochet in those last 3 stitches. And chain 3. All right, so now, you will have 3 double crochets at the beginning and end of your row. You're going to have 13 shell stitches with those 2 sets of front post double crochets, which you'll have a total of 28 front post double crochets, or 14 sets across if you did as the pattern is written for row 2. And again, I'm working with the swatch to show you how to do the pattern. We chained 3. Now we're going to turn our work. So now we're working on the back side of our work. All right, our chain 3 again counts as our first double crochet, and we'll double crochet in the next 2. 1 and 2. Please forgive my sniffy nose. I did take an allergy pill. That brings us to those 2 front posts from the first or the second row, but we're going to stitch those as back posts. So we're going to stitch around those posts from the back side of our work, so it's called a back post. Okay, so that's what it looks like on the back. On the front, it just looks like front posts. Now we're going to go to the chain 1 space of our shell stitch and stitch a shell stitch. So 2 double crochets, chain 1 and 2 double crochets. That brings us to the next 2 back posts, and so we're going to stitch a back post in those 2 front posts. And again, we're only doing double crochets in those front and back posts. Brings us to our next shell stitch. And again, 2 double crochets, chain 1 and 2 double crochets. And so we'll just repeat this all the way across, stitching a shell stitch in the chain 1 space of our shell stitch and back post double crochets in the front post from the previous row. And you'll do this all the way across your row. So we've set it up. You're not going to be adding any increases. You'll have the same amount of shells, the same amount of front and back posts, and you'll have that 3 double crochets at the beginning and end of each row. Once you get started, the hardest part will just be deciding your color changes, when to start the next color or when not to. This is the kind of pattern that I just love. All right, so I've stitched that across my swatch, and now I'm going to stitch 1 double crochet in those last 3 stitches. And chain 3. So the back of our work is still very pretty with those shell stitches. But let's turn our work over and you can see the texture of having the back posts in the front post stitches and those shell stitches. Isn't that pretty? And again, you're going to have 3 double crochets at the beginning, 3 double crochets at the end. You're going to have our 13 shell stitches and the 2 sets, or 2 front post, or 14 sets, or 28 altogether, of our front post. And of course on this row, because we stitched them from behind, they were back post double crochets. All right, so let's do row 4. We chained 3. We're going to double crochet in the next 2. Now that we're on the front side of our work, we're going to front post double crochet around those 2 front post double crochets. Now we're going to go to the chain 1 space and stitch our shell stitch just like we did on the previous row. And I'm not going to be changing colors. I'm just going to stick with this light blue so that you can see what we're doing, okay? We'll talk about how to change colors after a bit. All right, so I stitched my shell stitch. I'm going to stitch one front post in each of those two that were back posts from the previous row. Then we'll stitch our shell stitch, and we'll repeat this all the way across our row. Shell stitches in the chain one spaces of our shell stitches, and then we'll alternate front and back depending on what side of the work that we're on. Front posts are on the front, back posts on the back. And we'll repeat it all the way across our whole blanket. Of course, this is my swatch, so I only have 3 shell stitches, where you're going to have 13. Again, 3 double crochets, 2 front posts, shell stitch, all the way across till we reach those last 3, and then we just stitch 1 double crochet in the last 3 stitches. There we go. And chain 3. And so what we did is we basically repeated the previous row, only we stitched front posts instead of back posts because we're on the front side of our work. And I just absolutely love the texture of this. Isn't this gorgeous? So now we're ready for row 5. We've chained 3. Again, our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, and then we'll double crochet in the next 2 stitches. That brings us to those front posts from the previous row, and we're going to back post in those front post stitches. All right, then again we're going to stitch our shell stitch in our chain 1 space of our shell stitch. And again, just repeat it all the way across. 2 back post double crochet stitches. And a shell stitch in our chain 1 space. And we will repeat this all the way across. And again, I'm working from a swatch, so I'll have a lot less than you. But again, your stitch counts don't change. You'll have the same amount of shells on every row, the same amount of front posts or back post double crochet stitches. And then when you get to the end of your row, finishing up with 1 double crochet in those last 3 double crochet stitches. And chain 3. And see, even though the front posts and back posts are on the front, the back still looks very pretty. And the way it does it, it makes it have a little bit of a curve there. So it's still really pretty. And when you turn it to the front, you have that lovely texture. All right, let's do one more row on the swatch just to make sure you understand the back post and front post and how that works. All right, so again, we're going to double crochet in the next 2 because our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. And so now we're on the front of our work, and so we're stitching a front post double crochet in those 2 back posts from the previous row. And then again, our shell stitch in the chain 1 space of our shell stitch, which is again 2 double crochets, chain 1 and 2 double crochets. And we'll repeat this all the way across our row. And so you can see that it is basically, once we get it established, a 2-row repeat. And the only difference between the 2 rows is on the front we're doing front post double crochets, and on the back we're doing back post double crochets. It's the perfect pattern for sitting down and watching a nice movie without having to think or count too much, because once you've established your width, you can just go for it. You know, if you always stitch your shell stitches in your shell stitches, and you always put your front and back post stitches in your front and back post stitches, there's not a lot of counting. Just check it every now and then to make sure you haven't forgotten a stitch. All right, so I'm placing the 3 double crochets at the end of the row and chaining 3. Now, just to answer a question, when I do a pattern where I do 3 or more, or sometimes less, double crochets on the ends, that makes it so I don't have to put a trim on it. And I didn't want to start with those front and back posts because it pulls a little bit. And so I get that question sometimes. Why do I start with several double crochets at the beginning and end of each row that I don't stitch anything but a double crochet in? And I do that, like I said, because this is going to be a blanket where we don't have to add a trim. Okay? We won't be adding one on the sides or the top or the bottom. The only thing we'll be doing is finishing off a solid crochet row across so that it looks like this on the bottom. Okay? So this is the way row 6 should look, only yours is going to be a lot wider than mine. 3 double crochets, 13 shell stitches, 14 sets of 2 front post back post stitches, and ending with the 3 double crochets. It's a really simple pattern and a really beautiful pattern for a blanket. So now for the length of your blanket, you're going to continue to repeat row 5 and row 6 for 76 more rows, or more if you want a longer blanket. All right? Now remember, this is my actual blanket. The other one I was doing was a swatch. All right? So repeat row 5 and row 6 for 76 more rows or more if you want a longer blanket. And then I'll show you how to add a really simple trim. So here is my actual Scrap Happy Veterans blanket. It's a really nice size. And again, you can make it whatever size that you want to. But when we get to the end, we don't want to leave it with just this edge. And so what I'm going to show you is how to add a double crochet row there, just so that it looks similar to the end here where we started with our beginning double crochet row. So I ended with this particular yarn. There's not much here, so I'm not going to go in through it with it. So I'm going to bring in this blue that we've been working with. And I'm just going to bring that in and chain 3. We're going to double crochet in these next 2 double crochets. That brings us to those last 2 post stitches. So we're going to just stitch a double crochet in each of those 2. Now this brings us to our shell stitch. And so we'll stitch a double crochet in those 2 double crochets of our shell stitch, 1 double crochet in the chain 1 space, and 1 double crochet in the next 2 shell stitches, or I should say double crochets of of the shell stitch. Okay, and this is going to give us just a nice solid row of double crochet. All right, so we'll just work across our whole blanket, stitching a double crochet, just a regular one, in those 2 post stitches, 1 double crochet in the 2 double crochets of the next shell stitch, double crochet in the chain 1 space, and 1 double crochet in the next 2 double crochets of the shell stitch. And so basically we're just stitching a double crochet in each of the stitches across. 1 in the 2 front post stitches, 1 double crochet in the first 2 double crochets of the shell stitch, 1 double crochet in the chain 1 space, and 1 double crochet in the next 2 shell stitches. And then we'll just repeat this all the way across the bottom edge of our blanket. So I have stitched across, stitching a double crochet, and basically every stitch across. All right, so now I'm at the end. We're going to cut our yarn and weave this in. So I have completed my scrap happy, patriotic veterans blanket. I absolutely love the way it looks with all the different shades of red, white, and blue. Some of my reds are super bright. Some of them are a little more muted. I've got several kinds of variegated in here that are different from each other. This one's a little brighter. Just from my scraps in my yarn stash. All shades of red, white, and blue, all pulled together to make a beautiful blanket. So you don't have to do red, white, and blue. You can make this for anybody in any colors. You could even go ahead and just use yarns that you've picked out, not just from your yarn stash. But of course, the idea of our Scrap Happy projects is to use up some yarns in our yarn stash. I think you're really going to enjoy making this blanket because once you get going, it's just a 2-row repeat for as long as you need it. You want it a whole lot longer, just do as many rows as you need and then add that simple double crochet trim.